Well, let's continue now with reaction to the economic update and bring in NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh. Mr. Singh, good to see you again. Thanks for being here. So what's your assessment of this economic update?
Well, on the three key things that we were looking for, this Liberal government looks like they're unwilling to make the wealthiest pay their fair share, unwilling to go after the pandemic profiteering, the excess profits made by large corporations. They haven't put in place the sector-specific supports for the hardest hit sectors like aerospace, the airline workers, those who work in repair and maintenance, those who are the flight attendants, nor did they put in place a sector-specific support that's tied to jobs. And finally, when we look at the vaccines that the Liberal government's announced are going to be very far down the road, people need to know that there's more help for more people long term. And the Liberals, instead of announcing that, have announced cuts to the help that people need. And we were hoping for announcements on creating jobs through investing in clean technologies, in fighting the climate crisis. And again, on that, they're relying heavily on the climate bank, which has shown to be a failure in the past. Costs a lot, but very little projects out the door. So all in all, it seems a failed opportunity to really give Canadians some hope in a difficult time.
Where did you see the cuts for people who need help? I mean, the government's making the case they're going to increase the wage subsidy from 65% to 75% into the new year. They claim to be putting more money into the pandemic relief.
Well, if you look at their support year over year as they project in the economic snapshot, if you look at the year-over-year projections, they're projected to cut help to people after the first year or so. We know that the recovery is going to take years, and we know that absent any help right now, there is a clear K-shaped recovery happening, where the richest companies, your Amazons, Walmarts, Netflix, Google, have seen massive profits, some of them record profits, but small businesses, everyday folks, working class people have seen their economic situations go downwards, go into a worse and worse position. Absent long-term sustained investments in people, in social programs like healthcare, in the supports that people need, we're going to see this K-shaped recovery continue, and the wealthiest are sure going to do fine, but everyone else is going to suffer.
I want to pick up on some of these other issues in a moment, but let me jump ahead just a little bit. There are measures in here that will require legislation. They spend money, they increase taxes, some of these provisions. So I'm not sure we ever vote on the whole economic update itself, but portions of it I think will require the approval of Parliament. Are you prepared to support the government on what you've seen in this update?
Well, what we've done throughout this pandemic is we take each negotiation as we have it, and we fight to make sure we deliver help to people. And we'll give you updates as we go along and let you know where the negotiations are. But right now, our plan is there are a lot of things that need changing. There are a lot of different approaches we want to take. We want to make sure that people are centered in the response. And with this economic update, we don't see the type of focus on people that we'd like to see. So we'll negotiate, we'll fight hard, and as those negotiations happen, we'll keep you updated.
But based on what you've seen so far, without some kind of change, this is not something you could support.
Well, they haven't put forward the things that we wanted to see. And so I can clearly indicate that the things that we wanted to be there are not there. But when it comes to negotiations, we will let you know as those happen, and we'll continue to fight to deliver the help that people need.
All right. We have seen the government sort of looking down the road a little bit here post-pandemic and talking about more consultations on a national child care system with a plan they say will come to us in the budget. What do you think of that approach in terms of essentially taking the pandemic as an opportunity to remake, to some extent, the economy we'll have going forward after the pandemic?
Well, I would look at that as a positive sign if it wasn't completely missed out in terms of their actions. We put forward a motion in Parliament that was unanimously supported that said to keep the existing childcare spaces alone, we need an injection of $2 billion. Well, absent that investment, the Liberals have not put that forward. They broke that promise in this economic update. Then it doesn't seem very meaningful to me that they're going to talk about a plan when they haven't actually followed through on what they promised to do in the unanimous motion. They voted for it as well, to bring in an injection of $2 billion. When they break their word on a motion to help keep the childcare spaces we need, I don't really believe their commitment to expand to get to universal childcare. So it's not very believable given that they've broken their own word.
Okay, what about, they've created this $1 billion fund to help deal with the crisis in long-term care homes across the country, but they want to tell the provinces, how their spending plans need to look for them to qualify for the money. What do you think of that approach?
Well, there are some checks and balances in that, and that's good to see that there are some strings attached that require a plan, a financial plan in terms of how the money is going to be spent. We're still concerned about a couple of things. One is the for-profit system. Absent any movement on for-profit, we are worried that public money will go to long-term care centers that are for-profit, meaning some of that money might end up in the pockets of the shareholders or the CEOs, something that no Canadian thinks is the right thing to do. So that's one of our concerns. And also, it's taken the government months to deliver funding for long-term care. We knew right after the first wave that long-term care residents were the hardest hit, that our seniors, our loved ones, our vulnerable populations were the hardest hit. Then the second wave happened. To have waited this long to deliver specific funding for long-term care is pretty inexcusable.
Let's finish up on this. There's no plan to sort of, you've seen the deficit numbers and the debt numbers, no plan to rein in that spending. And in fact, the plan is to increase that spending over time. Does any of that worry you that there's no plan to say, okay, here's how we plan to get back to balance at some point, or here are the fiscal anchors we're going to build in to put checks and balances on spending? Is that important to you?
Well, I am concerned about debt and deficit, and I did notice in their plans they actually are planning to reduce the spending on programs. If you look into years 2 and 3, they start indicating a cut to the help that goes out to people. I'm deeply concerned about that, because if there's no plan to increase revenue, then Liberals and Conservatives will cut the help that people need. And that will only make the K-shaped recovery worse. That means that people who need help won't get it, and they will be in a worse position. So what we're proposing is, this is an opportunity to build back better. To do that, we need some revenue. And to increase revenue, the only place it makes sense is to ask those who have profited massively off this pandemic, like we did in World War, look at a profiteering, a pandemic profiteering tax. Excess profits made off of the pandemic should be taxed at a higher rate. And also look at taxing those that have extreme wealth. These are real concrete measures that can increase revenue to help us pay for the programs that we need. And I am worried about debt and deficit. I'm worried that it's going to result in cuts to the help that people need at a time when they need more and more supports.
All right. Jagmeet Singh, thanks again for your time. Take care.
Thank you.